a good idea at the time. And the last one from Sweeney. My madness finds congruity on the frozen peak of Borca, but what milk or bread sustains flesh invaded by the snow? A straight bed sprung with frost straddles the barren rock. Branches play bone to wasted limbs. In a cage of ice I pace the bars while frostbuds mimic sweat. I give fire to the glinting wind. As the snow succeeds the hail, in autumn I, precipitate, abandon chasms of oblique basalt for zones less igneous, less cold. Replete and fractious Glen Vulcan. 4 gaps to the wind define the glen, its fertile woods, its frigid springs trapped in sheer pits. Through clear pools, gravel spins in a shifting vortex. Cress and brookline dip their leaves to make a green meniscus. Beyond as in Glen Vulcan, drenched earth tonight is frozen, but no marauder breaks the glen's secure horizon. Bitter leaves drift among berries there. Garlic and the wild onion exhale their pungent steam against the iridescence of the sloes, and underfoot the path is frail with acorns. Sea and decaying groves, a king who stumbles among pawns. A king who stumbles among pawns. They didn't have chess in Old Irish. I mean, you have the game Fichel, which is thought to be perhaps connected with the game that was played in Anglo-Saxon England called Hneftafel, I think. Excuse my old Norse. But I had, to begin with, when I met Mike Smith and he was sort of arguing with me about poetry, and as I say, he was about 5 years older than me and he'd been part of Patrick Kavanagh's circle, and he talked to me about poetry in ways that I'd never had the opportunity to. And he advised me to read Ezra Pound. I thought, Ezra Pound, I obviously hadn't read my Bible very much, I didn't know about the book of Ezra. I assumed that because the first name ended with an A, it was a woman. It wasn't. As you probably know, he was the major innovator and technical master certainly for poetry in the English language in the 20th century. Unfortunately, made the mistake of getting connected with Mussolini and broadcasting for Rome Radio during the Second World War, and had a somewhat spotty later career. But he has stuff about there being 3 elements involved in poetry. And he, of course, being Pound, he gives them, to sound good, Greek names. Phanopoia, logopoia, and melopoia. Phanopoia, think about fantasy, the thing of visual images. Fantasy, it's very clear in Chinese poetry, you get it in Dante and people like this, it translates very well. I was really interested in what he was saying about visual imagery, and there's a lot of visual imagery in all my early stuff. Melopoia is, think of melody. The poia in each part is the part of the Greek that makes poetry, poiesis, poetry. It means making. So the making of melody is where you're using the particular sound effects of the particular language. Things like rhyme, things like rhythm and so on, but a lot more as well, sensitivity just to the sounds of words. And logopoia is wordplay, it's syntax, it's the layout of stuff and so on. I think he underplays the importance of logopoia. And one of the first people I found who sort of demonstrated this to me was a poet from, who was known as sort of an early Cambridge poet in England, William Empson, who wrote a book. He was sent down from Cambridge for various carryings on, but I think there was his thesis, he eventually turned into a book aged about 24 or 25, and it's the great book of English criticism, really, about poetry in the 20th century. Certainly the most influential, I think, of interesting ones. It's called 7 Types of Ambiguity. And in it, he talks about the way, he draws your attention to the way in which words have multiple meanings, radically different meanings. I gather, for instance, that the word set has the longest sort of sequence of pages and entries in the Oxford English Dictionary. And it's not that it's a very complicated word, it's just that there are loads of different meanings to the word. So you've got entry after entry after entry after entry. Think about the word fast. What does fast mean? Moving quickly. A fast die is one that doesn't move at all. I will stand fast. It doesn't mean I'm going to run. It means I'm going to stay here, you won't move me. Still. This is still happening. I can hear you still. It's both something that's continuing to happen, and it has ceased happening. You've got a stasis. So you've got, I mean, they're extreme examples of words which they have multiple meanings, and the meanings are actually antonyms. They're opposed to one another. It's really interesting. I mean, go think about words, and their multiple meanings. But in this, see in decaying groves, a king who stumbles among pawns, I was sort of still at the early stages of being amused by this. And I found in a dictionary that Sweeney is eating all the time beech mast, the nuts and so on under the beech trees in the woods. It's what he lives on, that and watercress and water. And the right in England, in Norman England, to allow your pigs to eat beech mast, which was very good for them, fatten them up, was known as panage, and an alternative way of writing it was pawns. So this is not an anticipation of the game of chess. It's just my little joke. See in decaying groves, a king who stumbles among beech mast, pawns. It's a little sort of trapdoor I put in for unwary readers. So then I shot for 20 years, and various things happened. I was trying I wanted to be able to write poetry that was as good as, there's one particular book which I think is sort of, I've carried around longer with me than any other book of poetry. Poems of the Late Tang, it's called. It's used to be in Penguin, it's now produced by the New York Review of Books, it's one of their series. And it's a superb set of translations by one guy, Angus Graham, of, I think it's 6 Chinese poets of the Tang dynasty. And his introduction makes it clear that he's bearing in mind the ideas and the criticism of Empson. So it's totally different from what Pound is doing. He's not relying on the immediate impact of the visual images. He's relying on the fact that this is linguistically very, very dense Chinese poetry, and he's trying to produce an equivalent in English. I love that. I loved Shakespeare's sonnets, a lot of other 16th, 17th century English poetry and prose, and I wanted to try and make something like that. Have you ever read The Phoenix and the Turtle by Shakespeare? It's an extraordinary poem, a really tight, dense little poem, where it goes about 2/3, 3/4 of the way through and changes from 4-line stanzas to 3-line stanzas, and I have no idea what the damn thing is about, but I love it. It's extraordinary, and I wanted to write poetry that had that sort of density, and I didn't care whether I understood what it meant or not, because I reckoned, if it's, if you can say what a poem means, and you're calling on all this thing, poetic license, you're allowed to, break lines, you're allowed to put in punctuation, take it out, screw around with the language as much as if you have all those freedoms, you better do something with it. So you can actually, poetry for me is sort of the license to use language to develop new meaning in ways that aren't accessible to other ways of, philosophy or science or whatever. This is a way to do something that isn't otherwise available to us. So, God and well, do it. Don't produce meaning that's already well known and cliched. But how do you do that? You need to develop some sort of a set of techniques for it. So I was trying to do that. And by chance, by a variety of chances in my personal life and stuff I was reading and other stuff, around 91, 92, I began to make a breakthrough and I began to find that I could do it. And in 95, a book came out called Stone Floods. But I started using these things. Remember, I was pointing to linguistic density there and using the word fast. One of the things that I was trying to, I'm constantly going to interrupt myself, little bracket. With the early poetry, one of the things that really bugged me was this thing about lyric poetry in general, but particularly in Ireland. That everybody, when they read poetry, it's as though they're saying mass. I will write you something, and this is really important. I want you all to be completely silent. And I will tell you now this about my childhood and how, I had a fried egg the following morning and God, it looked like the face of God appearing to me on the plate. And, this is supposed to affect us all deeply. We credit this, and isn't it marvellous? Despite the fact that it happens 20 times per book of every bloody poet you read. So I wasn't terribly satisfied with this, and my own voice doesn't impress me very much any more than probably your voices would impress me. I'm not impressed by my voice. Make it do something. Make it do something. Sing in some way. But also bring in resonances. I don't like solo voices greatly. I want to hear discords at least being gestured towards. So